They said she was the most beautiful enslaved woman in all of Georgia, but no one ever agreed on what made her beauty so dangerous. Some whispered it was her eyes, soft and warm, yet always watching. Others insisted it was the way she moved, calm and quiet, as if she carried the weight of a secret no one else could see. Her name was Lila, and in 1851 every soul on the plantation knew she lived under a kind of attention no one envied. Even the mistress avoided speaking her name. Lila's cabin stood at the edge of the quarters, a small wooden structure with warped boards and a single window crooked from years of storms. At night, a faint glow sometimes leaked from its cracks, though no lamp burned inside. People talked, but only in whispers. Something happened in that cabin, something no one dared explain aloud. The children avoided the path near it. The older women walked faster when they passed. Even the overseer rarely approached without calling first, as if afraid of what might be listening behind those boards. What they discovered inside her cabin in 1851 would shake the entire plantation long after the screams faded. Lila never asked for attention. She avoided the mistress's gaze, kept her eyes low when the master rode through the yard, and moved with careful intention, as if every gesture needed permission. But beauty, especially hers, was a kind of curse that followed its own rules. Other enslaved women watched her with a mix of sympathy and fear, knowing beauty brought dangers they wished she would never have to meet. The mistress, Eleanor Whitfield, carried a bitterness that grew sharper every month. She was convinced Lila's existence was a threat, though she couldn't articulate why. She inspected Lila's cabin more than any other, always claiming she was looking for signs of impropriety, but nothing was ever out of place. No food hidden, no tools missing, no man inside, nothing. Until the night Eleanor heard something, a whisper, soft as breath, coming from inside Lila's cabin long after everyone had gone to sleep. It wasn't Lila's voice. It wasn't any voice she recognized. The next morning, Eleanor demanded the overseer search the cabin. He refused, not out of loyalty, out of fear. Whatever whispered inside didn't want to be found. Not yet. Lila lived quietly, but quiet was never enough to protect someone like her. She spent most evenings tending to herbs behind her cabin, plants she learned to use from a woman long gone, a healer enslaved years before Lila was born. She would grind leaves, boil roots, and mix bitter teas for fevers and wounds. Some believed she learned more than medicine from that woman. Some believed she learned to survive. But in the spring of 1851, something changed. Lila began locking her door at night, something no enslaved person ever dared to do. The lock wasn't metal. It was a wooden beam she carved herself, sliding into place with a firm thud that echoed through the dark. People heard it, and they wondered. One evening, a young girl named Ruth approached Lila's cabin to deliver thread from the sewing house. She lifted her hand to knock, but stopped. Through the cracks in the wood, she saw shadows moving. Not one shadow, two, but Lila lived alone. Ruth ran before she could see more, heart pounding, breath trapped in her chest. She didn't know it, but she had just witnessed the first sign of what the plantation would eventually uncover. The master, William Whitfield, had grown increasingly suspicious of his wife's tension. Eleanor barely slept, pacing the halls at night, glancing through windows toward Lila's cabin as if expecting it to burst open. William dismissed her concerns at first, telling her she was imagining things, but fear as a sound, and Eleanor had heard it. A whisper, a second breath, a presence. William finally decided to confront Lila himself. He waited until dusk, when the air hung heavy and the cicadas quieted for the night. Lila was returning from washing linens when he stepped into her path, blocking her way. He asked her calmly whether anyone had been entering her cabin at night. She answered truthfully, no one. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't tremble. William studied her face, looking for deception, but found none. Yet when he walked away, Lila's composure cracked. She turned toward her cabin, eyes narrowing, jaw tightening. She whispered into the shadows behind her door, soft, urgent, almost pleading. And from inside, an answer came. Not a voice, a sound. A fragile, muffled movement William never heard, but someone else did. That someone was the overseer, Clay Mercer, a man feared for his cruelty, but respected for one thing. He had instincts sharper than any dog on the property. He didn't believe in spirits or curses, but he did believe in secrets, and Lila's cabin had one. He approached it late one night, after the quarter had gone silent. The moon was thin, barely lighting the path. The Clay moved slowly, carefully, the way a hunter stalks an animal he isn't sure he can handle. The closer he got, the colder the air felt, though the night was warm. Then he heard it. A soft, rhythmic sound, too faint to identify, too steady to ignore. Clay stepped closer until his ear nearly touched the wooden boards. Breathing. There was breathing inside the cabin. Two different rhythms, one slow, one trembling. But Lila wasn't inside. She was across the yard, asleep near the kitchen fire. Clay backed away, breath turning shallow, eyes scanning the darkness as if something inside might come crawling out. That was the night the overseer realized the truth. Lila's beauty wasn't the threat. What lived inside her cabin was. The following morning, Clay Mercer avoided Lila's cabin entirely. He did not order repairs, did not assign chores around it, did not mention what he heard. Men like Clay were not easily shaken. Yet something in the rhythm of that breathing haunted him. It was too human to be an animal, too controlled to be a child, too deliberate to be coincidence. Word travels fast in the quarters, even when no one speaks. The older women noticed Clay's distance, the way he refused to glance toward Lila's path. They held their tongues, but their eyes revealed understanding, an understanding born from generations forced to read danger in silence. That afternoon, Lila walked through the yard with a basket of folded linen. She seemed calm, maybe calmer than she had been in months, but the children noticed something behind her softness: relief. A weight lifted, a burden temporarily eased. As she passed the well, she paused and looked toward her cabin, not with fear, not with dread, with protectiveness. She knew exactly what was inside, and she knew it was only a matter of time before someone else tried to find it. That night, a woman named May, known for her sharp tongue and quicker intuition, decided she could no longer ignore the whispers about Lila's cabin. May had lived long enough on plantations to recognize the pattern. A secret like that never ends quietly. She feared not the secret itself, but what would happen when the wrong person discovered it. She waited until the moon sank low and the quarter drifted into uneasy sleep. Then she approached Lila's cabin barefoot, stepping over dry leaves to avoid noise. She pressed her hand against the wood-cold, unnaturally cold, and leaned closer. Inside, she heard movement, but it wasn't the breathing Clay had heard. It was softer, fragile, a small sound, like fabric shifting or a heartbeat against wood. May whispered Lila's name, hoping she was awake inside. Silence. Then something touched the inside of the cabin wall. A gentle tap, 3 times, spaced evenly. May stumbled back. Not because she was afraid of what was inside, but because she recognized that signal. She had used it decades earlier, hiding with someone she loved. The next morning, May found Lila near the wash barrels and pulled her aside quickly. Before the mistress emerged from the big house, Lila stiffened. May never approached without reason. But May didn't scold, didn't judge, didn't accuse her of inviting trouble. She simply said, "You ain't alone in there, are you?" For a moment, Lila froze. Her throat tightened. Her fingers dug into the wet linen she held. She didn't have to speak, her eyes betrayed everything. May inhaled sharply, not out of surprise, but out of fear for what this meant. Keeping secrets on a plantation was like holding fire inside dry cotton. One spark and everything could burn. But before May could say another word, the mistress appeared at the kitchen door, eyes narrowing in suspicion as she watched them. Lila quickly stepped away, returning to her tasks with mechanical calm. May did the same, though her heart pounded in her chest. The mistress lingered longer than usual, watching Lila as if waiting for her to slip. And May knew they were running out of time. Whatever lived in Lila's cabin had to be protected before someone far crueler found it first. Eleanor Whitfield had grown obsessed. Nights found her awake, pacing barefoot across her bedroom floor, staring out the window at the row of slave cabins, her mind turning over every whisper she had heard. She could feel that something was being kept from her. Something inside that cabin was a threat to her control, her pride, her marriage, or perhaps all three. She tried confronting her husband, but William dismissed her again and again, choosing ignorance over confrontation. Eleanor knew he feared scandal more than the truth. In her eyes, that made her burden heavier. One afternoon, she caught Lila entering her cabin earlier than usual, basket pressed close to her body, her steps hurried. Eleanor watched from the porch, jaw tightening. Something about the way Lila closed the door quick, purposeful, ignited a rage inside her chest. That was the moment Eleanor decided she would no longer wait for her husband or the overseer. She would uncover the truth herself. What she did not know was that she had chosen the worst possible night to act. Because inside that cabin, the secret was growing louder, too loud to hide much longer. When the moon rose that night, Lila returned to her cabin with trembling hands. She placed both palms on the wooden door before entering, as if silently asking the darkness for permission. Then she slipped inside and slid the wooden beam across the door. The air was warm and humid. A faint glow flickered from a hidden corner where a small candle struggled against the suffocating heat. Lila knelt beside the secret she had guarded for months, checking for the signs she feared most: fever, coughing, weakness. Instead, she heard a small, trembling breath. Not the breath of a grown person, but of someone tiny, fragile. Lila exhaled with trembling relief. She touched the soft cheek hidden beneath layers of cloth and whispered a lullaby she had learned from her mother, a lullaby only a handful of people still remembered. But outside, footsteps approached, slow, careful, measured. Someone was coming, and they were coming alone. Lila froze when she heard the footsteps outside her cabin. The sound was too steady, too confident to be a wandering animal or another enslaved person searching for warmth. She blew out the candle instantly. The room fell into darkness, leaving only the faint glow of moonlight seeping through the boards. She pulled the small bundle closer to her chest, pressing it against her heartbeat as if the rhythm could keep it quiet. The footsteps stopped directly outside the door. Lila held her breath. She didn't dare move. The person outside didn't knock and didn't speak. They simply stood there, listening. After a long moment, the wooden latch scraped slightly, as if someone were testing whether the beam inside could be forced open. Lila whispered, barely audible, "Please, stay still." The breathing beneath the cloth softened, as if whoever she held understood the stakes. Outside, the footsteps resumed, but this time, they did not walk away. They circled the cabin slowly, deliberately. Someone was searching for a way in, and they were not planning to leave without answers. Earlier that evening, Eleanor Whitfield had slipped quietly from the big house while her husband slept. She wore a dark shawl and carried a small lantern, its flame hidden behind a metal shutter to avoid detection. She had waited weeks for a chance like this, an undisturbed night, a restless curiosity, and a suspicion so heavy it drowned out caution. She believed Lila was hiding a man inside her cabin, a lover, a threat to her marriage, to her pride, to the fragile order she clung to. Eleanor crept through the grass, stopping whenever a board creaked or a dog stirred. When she reached Lila's door, she held her breath and listened. There it was again, the faint rustling, the whisper of movement too small to be a grown person. Her heart pounded, not with fear, with vindication. If she was right, she would finally have the proof she needed to punish Lila and reclaim control. She stepped back from the door, preparing to open the lantern's shutter for light. But before she could do it, something moved behind her. She spun around, lantern trembling in her hand. Someone else was awake. They said she was the most beautiful enslaved woman in all of Georgia, but no one ever agreed on what made her beauty so dangerous. Some whispered it was her eyes, soft and warm, yet always watching. Others insisted it was the way she moved, calm and quiet, as if she carried the weight of a secret no one else could see. Her name was Lila, and in 1851, every soul on the plantation knew she lived under a kind of attention no one envied. Even the mistress avoided speaking her name. Lila's cabin stood at the edge of the quarters, a small wooden structure with warped boards and a single window crooked from years of storms. At night, a faint glow sometimes leaked from its cracks, though no lamp burned inside. People talked, but only in whispers. Something happened in that cabin, something no one dared explain aloud. The children avoided the path near it. The older women walked faster when they passed. Even the overseer rarely approached without calling first, as if afraid of what might be listening behind those boards. What they discovered inside her cabin in 1851 would shake the entire plantation long after the screams faded. Eleanor stumbled backward, lantern shaking in her hand so violently the flame nearly died. Her face went pale beneath the moonlight. "No," she whispered. "It can't be. That's impossible." But Jonah's expression told her the truth she had refused to consider. Lila wasn't hiding a man. She was hiding a baby that was never supposed to exist. Eleanor's mind raced. If the child belonged to her husband, it would destroy everything, their reputation, their marriage, their standing in town. If it belonged to someone else on the plantation, it would still ignite scandal. Either way, the consequences would be catastrophic. "Move," Eleanor demanded, pushing Jonah aside. "I have to see it." Jonah blocked her path. "Ma'am, if you open that door, nothing will ever be the same." But the decision was no longer hers alone. Clay Mercer emerged from behind the trees, his expression grim. He had followed Jonah, suspecting trouble, and now he too heard the faint cry. 3 sets of eyes turned toward the cabin door. Inside, Lila felt the world closing in. Lila knew the moment had come. She didn't need to look outside to understand the danger waiting beyond her door. She lifted the cloth gently, revealing the tiny face pressed against her chest's soft skin, tight curls, eyes barely open. A child she had carried in secret, a life she had sworn to protect. She closed her eyes, whispering a promise she had repeated every night since the birth. "I want to let them take you." Outside, Clay's voice thundered through the boards. "Lila, open the door." The baby flinched. Lila held it closer, shaking. Jonah tried to intervene. "Clay, don't do this. Let the master decide in the morning." Eleanor stepped toward the door, lantern raised high. "No, she opens it now." Clay lifted his boot, preparing to break the fragile wooden frame. Lila rose to her feet, heart pounding, knowing she had only seconds left to choose. Trust the night, run into darkness, or face whatever waited outside. The baby whimpered. The door shuddered, and Lila made her choice. Clay's boots slammed against the door, shaking the entire cabin. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Lila clutched the baby tighter, feeling its tiny hands curl against her skin in fear. She whispered soothing words, but her own voice trembled. The wooden beam she carved herself, her only shield, held for the moment, but she knew Clay would break through eventually. He always did. Eleanor raised the lantern higher, face illuminated in harsh gold. Her lips curled into something between triumph and horror. "She has a child," Eleanor said, voice cracking. "A child she hid from me, from all of us." Jonah moved closer. "If you break that door, you'll kill them both." Clay ignored him. He stepped back, preparing for another strike, one that would splinter the wood. Inside, Lila closed her eyes and made a decision no mother should ever have to make. She walked to the back corner of the cabin, where loose boards she had carved for months lay waiting. With trembling fingers, she pushed one aside, revealing a narrow crawl space beneath the floor. She placed the baby inside, silent, hidden, protected. Then she turned toward the door, ready to face whatever burst through. Clay kicked again, and this time the beam cracked. The sound echoed across the quarters, drawing a few fearful eyes from distant cabins, though no one dared step outside. These moments were the kind that ended lives. Everyone knew it. Inside, Lila straightened her dress and wiped the fear from her face as best she could. She stood tall, hands clasped in front of her, breathing slowly as she forced her heartbeat to steady. She knew Clay expected a trembling woman. Instead, he would find someone ready. The door burst open. Wood splintered across the floor. Clay stepped into the cabin, lantern light flooding behind him from Eleanor, who hovered at the doorway like a vulture waiting for a body to stop moving. Clay scanned the room, eyes narrowing. Where is it? Lila didn't respond. Eleanor pushed past him. She tore at blankets, overturned baskets, kicked aside wooden bowls. There was a cry, she hissed. "Don't lie to me." Jonah lingered at the doorway, silently praying they wouldn't look down, because the floorboard Lila had lifted moments before had settled back into place, but not perfectly. One corner still lifted, just enough for Danger to see if it knew where to look. Clay noticed the uneven board almost immediately. His instincts were too sharp, too cruelly trained to miss something so small. He stepped toward it, boots creaking over the wood. Eleanor followed closely, eyes widening with each second. Lila shifted slightly, blocking their path with her body. "There's nothing there," she whispered. Clay shoved her aside. Not hard enough to knock her down, but enough to make her stumble. He crouched, fingers brushing the edge of the raised board. Eleanor leaned forward, lantern trembling in her hand, flame flickering dangerously. Jonah's voice cut through the tension. "Clay, stop." Clay ignored him. He wedged his fingers deeper, lifting the board slowly, inch by inch, until a faint sound drifted upward. Not a cry, not a breath, something softer. A tiny movement of cloth. Eleanor gasped. Clay froze. Lila stepped forward, desperation rising in her chest like a tidal wave. "Please." But Clay had already heard enough. He lifted the board the rest of the way, and the secret Lila had spent months protecting lay exposed beneath the moonlit cabin floor. For a long moment, no one moved. The baby blinked up at them, startled by the sudden light. Its tiny chest rose and fell rapidly, sensing danger even without understanding it. Eleanor staggered backward, lantern shaking so wildly the flame nearly died. "Whose child is that?" she demanded, voice shrill. "Whose?" Lila stepped swiftly between Eleanor and the opening in the floor, shielding the baby with her body. "He belongs to me," she said, voice steady but breaking at the edges. "Only me." Clay's jaw tightened. His orders were clear. Any child born in secret was considered theft, property stolen from the master, punishable by separation or worse. That was the law of the plantation. But something in Clay's expression faltered. He had seen brutality, delivered it, lived inside it. Yet the sight of a newborn tucked beneath floorboards struck him differently. He looked at Lila not with pity, but with something he hadn't felt in years: hesitation. Eleanor, however, felt no hesitation. She lunged forward, reaching for the child. Lila blocked her again, this time with fire in her eyes. Eleanor screamed, "William will decide his fate." But Clay's next words silenced the night. "No, I will." Clay lifted the baby carefully from the crawl space, surprising everyone, including himself. He cradled the child with an awkwardness that revealed how rarely he had held anything fragile. Lila watched him with terror carved across her face, ready to throw herself into danger if he made the slightest wrong move. Eleanor stepped close, venom in her voice. "This is the proof I needed. She seduced him, didn't she? She tricked my husband." Clay cut her off. "This child doesn't look like the master." Eleanor froze. Jonah exhaled softly in relief. Clay wasn't defending Lila. He was stating a fact, one that shifted the entire balance of power in the room. The baby's features were delicate, unmistakably resembling someone else entirely. Someone the mistress feared less, but someone the master would still punish severely if he knew the truth. Clay looked at Lila. "Whose child is this?" Lila swallowed hard. She knew that answering wrong could condemn her. Answering truthfully could condemn someone else. Eleanor stepped forward again. "Speak, girl." Lila finally whispered, "He was born of a choice I never wanted." Clay looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned toward Jonah, and what he said next would change every life on the plantation. Jonah felt Clay's eyes on him before he heard the words. Clay held the child, as though weighing not only its small body, but the consequences of every decision waiting ahead. The night around them was silent, thick, as if the darkness itself were listening. Eleanor's breathing quickened, her anger turning into something sharper fear. Not fear of Lila, but of what Clay was about to say. Clay spoke quietly, but the weight of his voice filled the room. "Jonah, you're coming with me. Now." Jonah stiffened. His throat tightened, but he did not step back. "Why?" Clay moved the lantern slightly, illuminating the baby's features. Shadows danced across its small face features that bore no resemblance to the master, but had another unmistakable similarity. Jonah's heart dropped. Eleanor gasped. "It's his child?" Jonah didn't deny it. He couldn't. His silence said everything. Lila looked at Jonah with a mixture of sorrow and apology. He had helped her hide the child, helped her survive the birth, helped her keep the secret alive. But now the truth had caught up to him, and it was her face the mistress blamed, not his. Clay shifted the baby in his arms. "Follow me, Jonah. Don't make me drag you." The tension in the cabin thickened. Something irreversible had begun. Jonah followed Clay out into the night, their shadows stretching across the dirt like long black scars. The quarters were silent, though Lila could feel dozens of eyes watching from behind dark windows. Breath held, waiting. No one dared step outside. Not when punishment hung in the air like smoke. Clay stopped beneath a large oak near the edge of the yard, the tree used for whippings, for chains, for fear. Jonah's stomach twisted, but Clay didn't reach for ropes or shackles. Instead, he faced him quietly. "You should have told me," Clay said. Jonah shook his head. "You would have separated them." Clay didn't argue. He knew it was true. In the rules of the plantation, a secret child was a crime punishable by selling one or both parents away. Clay looked at Jonah, seeing something he rarely allowed himself to notice. Humanity. Jonah wasn't defiant. He wasn't begging. He simply stood, shoulders squared, waiting for whatever fate Clay decided. Clay sighed, looking at the baby again. "Do you know what happens if the master finds out?" Jonah nodded once. Clay stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "Then don't let him find out." Jonah blinked. He hadn't expected mercy, but it came with a price, and Lila would pay it too. Inside the cabin, Eleanor seethed, pacing like a caged animal. Her fury had nowhere to go, not toward Jonah, who was now in Clay's control, nor toward William, whom she feared confronting. So it turned inward, turning into something sharper, more poisonous. Lila remained standing near the overturned baskets, her hands clasped tightly, trembling only when Eleanor looked away. Her secret was exposed, but a child still breathed, and that was enough to give her strength. Eleanor stopped suddenly, turning toward Lila with a cold, distant expression. "You will bring that child to the big house at dawn," she said. "William will decide where he belongs." Lila's heart nearly stopped. She stepped forward instinctively. "He can't." Eleanor raised her hand. "Speak again, and I'll have Clay lock you in the smokehouse until morning." Lila's voice died in her throat. Eleanor stepped out into the night, the lantern's glow shrinking as she moved away. May slipped quietly into the cabin once Eleanor was gone. Her eyes fell on the raised floorboard, then on Lila's empty arms. "They took him?" Lila shook her head. "Not yet." May approached her, voice barely above a whisper. "Then we still have time." But time was no longer an ally. It was a fuse burning fast. Clay returned with Jonah and the baby just before sunrise. The horizon glowed faintly, casting long, soft shadows across the yard. Lila rushed to the door as Clay approached, but he raised a hand sharply. "Inside. Now." Lila obeyed, heart racing. Jonah followed, bruised only by fear, not by Clay's hand. Once the door closed behind them, Clay spoke with a gravity none of them expected. "I'm giving you one chance," he said. "One." Jonah stepped forward. "What do you want us to do?" Clay looked at him, then at Lila. "You leave tonight." Lila felt the ground tilt. "Leave?" "Run," Clay said. "Both of you. Take the child and get as far from this place as you can. Before Eleanor convinces the master to sell you or worse." Jonah's voice cracked. "You're helping us escape?" Clay didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was low, almost ashamed. "I've done enough wrong in my life. This is something I can live with." Lila covered her mouth, tears she had held for months finally breaking free. Clay leaned closer. "You have until sundown. After that, I can't protect you." But what Clay didn't know, Eleanor was already awake and watching. Eleanor stood at her bedroom window, hands gripping the sill so tightly her knuckles turned white. She had seen Clay return with Jonah. She had seen the three shadows slip into Lila's cabin, and she felt deep in the pit of her stomach that something had shifted. Something had escaped her control. She hurried down the stairs, not bothering with shoes or propriety, moving with the urgency of someone who sensed betrayal. She pushed open the front door and stepped onto the porch, the morning light revealing just enough of the yard to confirm her suspicion. Clay was helping them. Her breath trembled with rage. "Not in my house," she whispered. "Not under my roof." She turned back inside, heading toward William's study. If she couldn't stop Clay alone, she would unleash someone far more dangerous, her husband. Inside Lila's cabin, the reality of the plan settled over them like a heavy shroud. They had one day to prepare, one chance. May arrived quietly, carrying a small bundle of herbs, bread, and a torn map she had drawn years earlier. "This will get you to the river," she whispered. "After that, pray." Lila nodded, though fear coiled in her chest. Because even with Clay's help, even with May's guidance, escaping a Georgia plantation in 1851 was nearly impossible. And Eleanor was already setting the trap. By midday, the plantation carried an eerie tension. The enslaved sensed the shift in the air, the hurried steps, the clipped voices, the way the mistress stalked the yard with a fury she could barely contain. No one knew the details, but everyone felt it. Something was unraveling. Inside Lila's cabin, May moved quickly, packing items into a cloth sack. Jonah checked the map again and again, his hands shaking despite his attempts to steady them. Lila held her child close, rocking gently, whispering songs meant to calm her own trembling heart as much as the child's. Clay appeared at the doorway without knocking, face tight with urgency. "The master knows something's wrong," he said. "Your window of escape is shrinking." Jonah stepped forward. "We can't leave now." Clay shook his head. Too many eyes during the day. Wait until dusk, when changing guards and supper distract the yard. Lila looked at him, voice quiet. Will we make it? Clay didn't answer. He glanced toward the big house, where Eleanor's silhouette stood glaring from the porch. Run fast, he finally said. And don't look back. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the plantation shifted into evening routines. Fires lit in the kitchen house. Overseers gathered for supper. The master read news near the window, pipe smoke swirling around him. And Eleanor, tense and pacing, felt time slipping through her fingers. Inside the cabin, the three prepared. May tied the sack securely to Jonah's back. Lila wrapped the baby tightly against her chest, securing cloth so it wouldn't cry. Jonah opened the door just enough to peer outside. Twilight had settled, luring shapes and softening shadows. Clay returned one last time, breath unsteady. There's something you need to know, he said quietly. Eleanor told the master you're hiding contraband. He ordered a full search of the cabins at dawn. Jonah's blood ran cold. Then if we're not gone tonight, you won't get another chance, Clay finished. He stepped aside and pointed toward the tree line beyond the fields. Head for the river. Follow May's map. Avoid the main road. And whatever you do, don't let the lanterns behind you catch up. Lila touched Clay's arm, a gesture of gratitude deeper than words. Clay nodded once, jaw set. This was the last kindness he would ever allow himself. They slipped into the night like shadows unmoored from the earth. Jonah led, moving silently across the field, avoiding patches of moonlight that might give them away. Lila followed close, her steps light despite the weight of the child against her chest. May watched from her doorway, hands clasped, praying for the impossible. Behind them, the plantation glowed with lanterns, dozens of small fires marking the heart of a place they could never return to. Every step away from it felt both terrifying and liberating. They reached the cornfield, its tall stalks offering temporary shelter. Jonah motioned for them to crouch low as he scanned for patrols. The only sound was Lila's breath and the faint rustle of the baby beneath the wraps. Then a shout. Distant, but unmistakably from the direction of the big house. Lila's heart seized. They're counting the cabins, Jonah whispered. Lanterns began to move across the yard. Fast. Jonah gripped Lila's arm. We run now. They burst from the cornfield toward the woods, feet pounding against dirt, breath tearing through the cold night air. Behind them, dogs began to bark. The chase had begun. Branches whipped Jonah's arms as he led them into the dense forest. Lila followed, careful but swift, shielding the baby with her body as roots and rocks threatened to trip her. The darkness was thicker here, deeper, swallowing their shapes but also hiding their movements. Behind them, the barks grew louder, then voices, then the metallic clatter of rifles. Faster, Jonah urged. We're close. They reached a ravine where a narrow stream cut through the earth. Lila hesitated at the edge. One wrong step could send her tumbling. Jonah jumped first, landing unevenly but safely. He reached up for her. Give me your hand, he whispered. Lila clutched the baby tighter, took a breath, and leaped. Jonah caught her wrist just as her foot slipped on the muddy bank. For a moment, she dangled over the ravine, but Jonah pulled her up, muscles straining. They collapsed onto the opposite bank just as torchlight flickered through the trees behind them. Lila looked at Jonah, voice trembling. We won't outrun them. Jonah shook his head. We don't have to outrun them. He pointed ahead. We just have to reach the river. And the river was close enough to hear. The river roared before them, dark and wide, reflecting the moon like a silver blade cutting through the land. Jonah waded in first, the cold water rising to his knees, then waist. Lila followed, breath shaking, each step heavier than the last. The baby whimpered at the chill. Lila whispered soft words, rocking gently as she moved deeper. Torches, appeared at the tree line. Shadows emerged behind them, hunters, overseers, men who had chased countless runaways before. Eleanor stood among them, lantern in hand, eyes burning with obsession. She shouted, "Bring them back alive. The master wants the child." Clay didn't move. He stood behind the others, gaze lowered, hiding the truth in his silence. He had led them toward the one escape route the patrols never fully watched. Jonah reached the current, gripping Lila's arm to steady her. "Once we cross," he whispered, "we're out of Whitfield land." The water surged around them, threatening to pull them under, but they pushed forward, step by trembling step. A shot rang out behind them. The bullet struck the water inches from Lila's hand. Jonah pulled her toward the far bank. Lila held the child above the waves. Clay stepped between the shooters and the river, and the darkness swallowed the fugitives whole, carrying them into a future the plantation would never control again.